Hi, I'm Orion Vooght. Today we're going to discuss the myth of Osiris and how I believe it's an ancient axiom for DMT and where in the world we can possibly find it. Now, the mysteries of Abydos were, and still are, a ceremonial practice which was celebrating the resurrection of Osiris, god of rebirth and the afterlife. Traditionally speaking, Osiris was seen depicted as taking sail of the Neshmet upon the river Nile. The Neshmet, we find, is referred to as a cosmic or solar barge belonging to Nun, a primordial deity likened to the waters of chaos from which arose the Benben, or mound of creation. The Benben has since become synonymous with the mound of Osiris, atop of which sits an acacia tree, which itself is wholly symbolic of the tree of life. But why? The significance of the myth of Osiris may really only be understood if we do actually decide to approach it with a wholly scientific standpoint. Classically speaking, Egyptologists prefer to refrain from such ambiguity and like to remain ostensibly steadfast regarding their original interpretations. And as thus, their story remains that Osiris was in fact tricked by his brother, sealed inside a casket and tossed into the river Nile, before becoming further entombed within a great tamarisk tree, from which he was rescued and murdered once again, whereby he then became synonymous with the constellation of Orion and the lifeblood of the Acacia. An absolute absurdity in the extreme. However, I believe everything here is allegorical by nature. Everything. So, looking at this mythology through an altogether scientific lens, what can we learn? Moreover, what could be so fundamentally profound regarding such an otherwise nonsensical narrative as old as the historical record mean to us today in the 21st century? Well, our first clue lies within the lifeblood, albeit the sap of the acacia, in which Osiris has been entombed. For the acacia, we find, has extraordinarily high potentials of extractable N,N-dimethyltryptamine, more commonly known as DMT. Now, DMT is in fact found throughout the plant and animal kingdom, an altogether highly illicit psychedelic compound also found in the human brain, but nobody really quite knows why. Moreover, DMT is present within the cerebral spinal fluid, our eyes, lungs, and neocortex, the latter being likened to a reality modulator responsible for higher brain functions such as perception. Well, nothing to see here then, right? Well, firstly, DMT is only considered extractable from the acacia via a process which appears to mimic the mythology, whereby the source, in this case the acacia, is submerged within a liquid before being alchemically raised or indeed resurrected. Furthermore, a two-dimensional rendition of DMT shares an inexplicable number of commonalities with Osiris' celestial namesake, the constellation of Orion. As above, so below. Osiris, however, shares another cosmology which once again appears to identify DMT in the night sky. Classically speaking, Osiris is deified as the constellation of Orion, but is also spoken of in terms of a cosmological counterpart called Unefa. Unefa is considered an anthropomorphic representation of Osiris with the head of a rabbit or indeed a hare. Those familiar with the zodiac and precessional cycle of the stars will know that the constellation of the rabbit or hare lies directly below that of Orion, albeit Osiris. Today we recognize this constellation as Lepus, which is ancient Greek for hare or rabbit. The ancient Egyptians identified this star cluster as Wenet, the hare, and also associated it along with Osiris and the notion of rebirth and immortality. So if we endeavour to marry Osiris, albeit Orion, with the head of the constellation of Lepus the rabbit, what happens? Well, returning to the mysteries of Abydos, we find that we're actually being told to do so. And again, why? Well, in order for Osiris to set foot upon the Neshmet, our cosmic barge, a star we recognise today as Mula Poris, we have to connect the proverbial dots between Orion and Lepus. Firstly, the brightest star in the constellation of Lepus is called Alpha Leporis, known to the Egyptians by its ancient Arabic namesake, Arneb, which directly translates as the hare. Then connects Arneb with the Neshmet, the cosmic barge, as the mythology rightly tells us to do. And in doing so, we create a stylized hexagon and the indole benzene ring, which creates an almost perfectly identical rendition of the molecular structure of DMT. Furthermore, in keeping with satisfying mythology alongside the molecule by incorporating our constellations, we actually manifest another ancient Egyptian deity known as the Father of the Gods and the Hidden One, Sa or Sahu being synonymous with the notion of an incorruptible soul. DMT, however, has since been dubbed the spirit molecule after Dr. Rick Strassman's now famous human trials which took place at the end of last century. Strassman had theorized, and science has since confirmed in laboratory rats, that DMT is increased in the human brain during death and near-death experiences. And for all intents and purposes, those who introduce extraneous amounts of DMT beyond the blood-brain barrier, DMT does in fact appear to otherwise trick the brain into a mini-death-like state of mind. Termed as a typical breakthrough experience, it witnesses the practitioner becoming spiritually emancipated, whilst momentarily being given the keys to the cosmos and an innate understanding of one's own temporal existence, all before having one's ego systematically dissolved and further subjected to their own spiritual resurrection. Classic DMT volunteer experience quotes include the following kind of statements. It was familiar to me. It was like I was in the waiting room for the rebirth of souls. I was the light. I didn't know whether it was my birth I was re-experiencing, my death, which was yet to come, because I know that time crumbles. The linearity of time is totally meaningless in these states. You're at the Godhead, the point where all time folds in on itself. There was no concept of time. It was disorienting. I was so terrified. I have never in my life been so terrified to be blasted out of my body, to leave my body behind and be going warp speed backwards through my own DNA, out the other end and into the universe. Well, incorruptible soul indeed. And as I've already stated, DMT does in fact appear to be in the makeup within the human eye. And here it's where we shall return to the myth of Osiris. For a classic bust of Osiris, with his conical headdress and green skin, share a wealth of commonalities within the photoreceptors inside the human eye and pineal gland. And as if to reinforce this hypothesis further, the hieroglyph which accompanies the name of Osiris, god of resurrection, actually directly translates as seat of perception. Once again, I'm Orion Vooght, and the ancient cosmological gods trilogy of books, including The Spirit in the Sky, DMT, Deities, Myth and Tryptamines, and Searching for Osiris and the Tree of Life can all be found via Amazon, and they're all linked below. Thank you for listening. That's the spirit.